What if events went differently? What if Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man was in Avengers Infinity War? What if the Amazing Spider-Man was in the MCU? Picking up from the last episode of What if the Amazing Spider-Man was in Captain America Civil War, 2 years have passed and Peter Parker has earned his doctorate in biochemistry. He is also a research assistant and scientist in a lab majoring in chemical engineering near his place. Peter lived separately from Aunt May, but they were still in close contact. He has also quit his job as a photographer at the Daily Bugle after his last rift with Tony Stark. He was no longer a part of the Avengers. Although he saved James Rhodes from being paralyzed during their fight in Civil War, Tony told Peter that his actions of siding with Captain America's team had resulted in his Avengers membership being terminated. Peter felt that being Spider-Man was no longer worth it. The crime rates around New York City and the world has dropped even without Spider-Man around. He somehow wondered if Gwen would still have been alive if they were together if he had decided to quit being Spider-Man earlier. While his life was relatively peaceful, Peter sometimes felt he missed his web-slinging days. Steve Rogers and his team were still on the run after events in Civil War. The beginning of this Infinity War timeline will be where Thanos has obliterated Xandar to acquire the Power Stone. He then shifted his intentions and intercepted the spaceship containing the survivors of Asgard's destruction. The Mad Titan killed Heimdall and Loki. Thanos has acquired the 2 Infinity Stones with the Space Stone in his hands. Before Heimdall was dead, he used his last breath to open the Bifrost and sent Bruce Banner back to Earth. Thor, meanwhile, was left to die amidst the explosion on the spaceship. In his human form, Bruce Banner crash-landed back into the Sanctum Sanctorum in New York City. He alarmed Wong and Doctor Strange of the impending doom of Thanos. Strange would then recruit Tony Stark after informing him of how serious the situation was. At the same time, when Ebony Maw and Cull Obsidian arrived on Earth with their dominant spaceships, Peter was packing up for his work at the laboratory. Peter was about to go on a date with a Daily Bugle reporter. Mary Jane was present during the final events of The Amazing Spider-Man 2 as she witnessed Spider-Man battling Rhino across the street. After defeating Rhino, MJ approached Spider-Man for an interview, but he fled away. Peter, without his disguise, would then later meet with MJ, and they felt the chemistry between them. They would then decide to be together in a relationship, and it now has only been 2 years since then. But MJ still doesn't know of Peter's true identity as Spider-Man. As he packed up in his lab, his spider sense started tingling. His co-workers told him that strange-looking objects were in Earth's airspace. He then saw a enormous spaceship in New York City. Peter knew that something was amiss, but he told himself that he has already quit his duties as Spider-Man. Let the other Avengers handle it, he thought to himself. Due to the absence of Spider-Man in the battle against Ebony and Cull, there were only Doctor Strange, Wong, and Tony Stark who fought against the Black Order. Maw wanted to retrieve the Time Stone due to the enhancement placed on the stone. Maw then defeated Strange and brought him back aboard a spaceship. Without Spider-Man's help, only Tony Stark and Doctor Strange were aboard Maw's spaceship, while Wong stayed behind to guard the Sanctum. Bruce then saw the phone, which Steve handed Tony during the Civil War, where Tony could contact Steve should he need his help. Peter then received a call from MJ that something had arrived in New York and needed to cancel their date. Peter saw the news on television from a nearby cafe of Tony Stark and the rest battling against the Black Order. Peter himself has never met such beings as Ebony and Cull. He went to the location where the Avengers were battling earlier and only saw destruction everywhere. Peter then saw Bruce was there, still recovering from the fight. Peter recognized Bruce but never expected him to be around. Bruce was thankful to meet Peter Parker and they talked. Bruce told him about the Mad Titan and his plans to snap half of the universe away. Bruce then asked what was happening between Tony and Steve, where Peter then explained what happened. Peter also told Bruce that he was Spider-Man all along, as Bruce was not aware of his identity. Bruce was surprised but then said that he was glad to have an ally with him. Bruce said that he should head to the Avengers compound around. Peter still had Rhodes's number as Rhodes owed him a favor for saving him. Peter said that they should regroup. The Guardians would then respond to the distress call from the Asgardian ship. With Thor being rescued, the team split into two. Rocket, Groot, and Thor went to Nidavellir to forge the Stormbreaker, while the others obtained the Reality Stone at nowhere. Thanos has already obtained the Reality Stone and kidnapped Gamora. Told him of the location of the Soul Stone on Vormir to avoid further torture to her sister, Nebula. Gamora was later killed, allowing Thanos to obtain the Soul Stone. With 4 stones in his hands, Thanos was on the verge of completing his gauntlet. Approximately at midnight, and Corvus Glaive would ambush Wanda Maximoff and Vision. Steve's team came to rescue them, and they met with Peter and Bruce and Rhodes. Steve Rogers said that he was happy that Peter has continued living his life, even without his alter ego as Spider-Man. Peter then told the rest about Thanos and his plans. They knew that they only had one option, to head over to Wakanda. There, they might be able to retrieve the Mind Stone from Vision without killing him, but Peter wasn't sure if he still fits in the team as he was no longer an Avenger. Steve and Natasha assured him that they needed all the help that they could get. With Peter being a genius, they know that having either Peter Parker or Spider-Man in the battle would boost them. Peter went back to his laboratory and told his co-workers that he needed to take some time off for his plans. He told MJ that he was going on a mission and he could not disclose anything yet, but he will return soon. He told Aunt May that he was going to help his friends. After finishing his tasks, Peter headed to Wakanda, where they began the extraction of the Mind Stone from Vision. He met Shuri there, and the duo worked with Bruce to begin removing the stone. Meanwhile, Tony managed to kill Ebony Maw after using the same tactic as Spider-Man did in the original Infinity War timeline. He managed to blast a hole in the spaceship, and it tossed Ebony out into space and froze him. With that, Tony managed to save Doctor Strange, and they went towards Thanos' destroyed homeworld, Titan. Nebula managed to escape captivity from Thanos and told the other Guardians to meet her on Titan. The Guardians would then cross paths with Tony Stark and Doctor Strange, in which they assured each other that their common enemy was the Mad Titan Thanos. Thanos would then battle with all of them. However, without the help of Spider-Man as in the original timeline, much of the battle's outcome would be similar. The Avengers and the Guardians tried to restrain Thanos, but it failed. Mantis would have been killed as Spider-Man wouldn't be there to save her in this timeline. The Avengers and Guardians would have tried to defeat Thanos, but eventually failed. The Mad Titan got a hold of the Time Stone and went to Earth to obtain the final stone. Meanwhile, on Earth, Rogers has reunited with Bucky Barnes and the others. They decided to ready their defenses, and Peter, meanwhile, opened his briefcase and prepared his Spider-Man suit just in case. Bruce said that he needed to provide more firepower for the rest of the team. Since he couldn't turn into the Hulk, he fought in Stark's Hulkbuster armor. As the Black Order arrived with the army, they eventually clashed with the Wakandans. Peter stayed behind to fasten the restraction process of Vision's Mind Stone. Corvus Glaive arrived and ambushed them, but he didn't know that Peter was there, and Peter had powers. Shuri tried to attack Corvus, but was defeated. Peter himself turned into a Spider-Man suit and started webbing Corvus. He was not a superhero in almost 2 years, and he was a little rusty. Thor, Rocket, and Groot would eventually arrive to reinforce the Avengers. Thanos' army was losing, but Shuri and Peter were unable to complete the extraction on time as Thanos arrived. Thanos tossed aside Shuri with ease, and Peter was shocked and fear, as his spider sense were tingling like crazy. He tried to kick the Mad Titan, but Thanos quickly threw him against the wall. With the stone unable to be destroyed, Vision told Wanda to destroy it herself, and much of the original timeline would be the same. Thanos used the Time Stone to reverse time, and he removed the Mind Stone from Vision, killing him. Thor would severely wound Thanos with his Stormbreaker, but the snap happened eventually. Peter recovered from consciousness and saw as Shuri and the others disappeared into dust. Peter received a phone call from MJ and picked it up, and he heard MJ telling him that she was feeling something strange, and the phone just dropped to the ground. He went out and saw the others starting to vanish. Rocket, Romanoff, Rhodes, Mubaka, and Banner, and everybody else were still around. Peter then understood that Thanos was victorious in a snap. The other Avengers that survived looked in horror as they could do nothing. Peter Parker tried to call Aunt May, but nobody picked up the phone. trying to give up his duties as a hero. Feeling angry that he has lost everyone that he loved, Peter Parker wasn't sure what to do next. He realized he only wanted revenge to kill the Mad Titan, with Thanos still alive somewhere. Bent on bloodthirst and revenge, Peter started using his resources at Wakanda to construct a Spider-Man suit that could slay even the Mad Titan himself. And that is going to be what if What if events went differently? What if the Amazing Spider-Man was in the final installment of Avengers Endgame? Immediately after the defeat of the Avengers at the hands of Thanos, Peter Parker started working closely with the surviving Wakandans to create a powerful Spider-Man suit made out of vibranium that could slay Thanos himself. With Aunt May and MJ gone, Peter's last hope of humanity was all gone. All he wanted to do was find Thanos and kill him, but with Thanos gone off the radar, they weren't sure whether to locate him. Captain Marvel then rescued Tony and Nebula that were drifting in space after their battle with Thanos on Titan. They eventually reunited with the rest of the Avengers and Guardians who survived on Earth. Peter met Tony and blamed Tony for everything that happened. He said that if Tony never had a rift with the other Avengers, they would have defeated Thanos. Steve tried to consult Peter, but Peter said that he has lost everyone that he cared about in this world, and there is nothing that Tony could do. Tony fought back and said that Peter should have continued being Spider-Man. Even after the Civil War, he chose his side to be with Steve, and he was there when the Black Order first came. They could have reversed the odds of victory. After a while, Tony and Peter calmed down. Rocket Raccoon then told the other heroes that their satellites found a radar where a significant impact happened on a distant planet. The Avengers and Guardians knew that it was the actions of Thanos using the stones. They figured that they could reverse the actions of Thanos by obtaining the gauntlet. They eventually went to the planet and they saw Thanos resting in his house. The Avengers started attacking Thanos, and Peter, with his vibranium Spider-Man suit, shot webs that incapacitated the Mad Titan. Thanos then told them that he had already used the stones to destroy the stones. There was no use of them to him as they had served no more purpose. An enraged Thor then decapitated Thanos with a Stormbreaker. The heroes then headed back to Earth after learning that nothing else could be done. Peter eventually gave up on being Spider-Man and put away his vibranium suit in the garbage. He didn't feel that he had any point left in life, so he decided to throw away his life. He quit his job at the lab and soon became an alcoholic. Peter started fighting in the underground matches for a bet to earn a living. He felt that it was the only way to release his anger of losing everyone he loved. 5 years have passed and it was already 2023. Steve Rogers was helping out others, coping with the aftermath of the blip, while Natasha was still coordinating the other heroes, helping others who were struggling. She was also searching for Clint Barton, who became the vigilante known as Ronin after the death of his family. Steve would meet Natasha to catch up on things. They were then interrupted by Scott Lang, aka Ant-Man, and Scott explained how he only experienced 5 hours in the quantum realm. Although 5 years have already passed, in the real world he proposed to them that they could go back in time traveling to reverse the actions of Thanos in the present. Steve said that they needed several brains for this, and Bruce agreed to help them, while Tony at first was hesitant, and he said that he already had a family with Pepper and Morgan. In this timeline, Tom Holland's Spider-Man doesn't exist, and Rocket Raccoon also agreed to help the Avengers, and they said that they needed as many brains to help them. Steve said that Peter Parker is a genius who could contribute to the team, but Peter has since fallen to the slums of the underground fighting. The group eventually met with Peter and told him that they needed his help. Peter refused to say that the idea of time travel was absurd and that it wasn't realistic. However, Steve Rogers told Peter that this could be the chance to restore his loved ones for real. Peter felt that he could meet Aunt May, MJ, and that would be great. He has lost a lot in his life: Gwen Stacy, Uncle Ben, Captain Stacy, and Harry Osborn. Peter said that he would consider it and left to fight. Natasha would recruit Clint, who was in Tokyo, killing criminals battles while Banner and Rocket recruited an overweight Thor. Eventually, Tony cracked the time travel theory and Peter joined them. Peter said that he was willing to put his differences aside to help create the time traveling device. After the machine was made, the team split up. Natasha went with Clint to Vormir, Rocket and Thor to Asgard, Rhodes and Nebula to Morag to steal the Power Stone before Star-Lord. Banner, Tony, Steve, Ant-Man, and Peter traveled back to New York City in 2012. Much of the original timeline of Endgame would happen in this fanfic timeline. Natasha would sacrifice herself instead of Clint to allow them to get the Soul Stone. Rocket extracted the Reality Stone from Jane, while Thor met his mother and retrieved Mjolnir, and Banner convinced the Ancient One to give the Time Stone to him. Peter witnessed back the invasion of Earth, and he saw himself in a distance, fighting against the Chitauri. He also saw himself talking with Aunt May after rescuing her. Feeling more motivated to complete the mission to succeed, Peter and Steve retrieved the Mind Stone from Hydra's sleeper agents, but Tony and Scott failed to retrieve the Space Stone. Rogers and Stark went back to 1970, where they obtained more Pym particles and an earlier version of the Tesseract. 2014 Thanos learned of his future self's success and the Avengers' attempt to undo his actions in the future. He then sent 2014 Nebula forward in time to prepare for his arrival. The Avengers then learned that Natasha had sacrificed herself to obtain the Soul Stone. They placed the stones into the gauntlet that Peter, Bruce, Tony, and Rocket had created. Bruce wielded the gauntlet and snapped as he had the more resistance to the radiation, but the damage taken was enough to hinder him. He snapped to bring everyone who was missing in the snap back to life. Peter then received phone calls from Aunt May and Mary Jane. They said that they weren't aware of what was going on, but they were glad that Peter was safe. As Peter was about to continue talking, his spider senses started to tingle. He looked outside and saw several beams heading towards the Avengers compound. Peter alerted the rest to take cover, and the entire Avengers compound was bombarded. They then saw the Mad Titan's arrival with his warships. Like in the original timeline, the Avengers would then fight against Thanos. Tony, Steve, Thor and Peter would clash with the Mad Titan himself. A more ruthless Thanos proved to be a more formidable foe with 4 of them combined. Peter has armed himself with his vibranium Spider-Man suit and put up a fight against Thanos, but Thanos eventually defeated him. He shot several stun webs at him, but Thanos stayed strong. As the Avengers were on the brink of defeat, a restored Dr. Stephen Strange arrived with the reinforcements made up of the Ravengers, other sorcerers, the restored Avengers, armies of Wakanda, Asgard, and the other Guardians of the Galaxy. Captain Marvel appeared and destroyed Thanos' warship, but Thanos overpowered her and seized the gauntlet. Instead of Tony tricking Thanos to get the stones, Peter Parker did it this time. Peter said that he waited 5 years to kill Thanos, and his chance was finally confirmed. Peter then snapped, causing Thanos and his armies to disintegrate while his armies was burning up from the impact of the snap. Peter's vibranium suit was combined with a nanotech healing that suppressed the damage. Peter realized that his snapped arm was damaged, but he was also grateful that Thanos and the rest eventually disintegrated. In this timeline, Tony didn't die and continued with his family. Steve would return in time to return all of the stones to their original timelines and locations. Peter himself reunited with MJ and Aunt May. He told them both about his true identity as Spider-Man all these years, and MJ and Aunt May embraced Peter, who was still recuperating from his injuries. Sometime later, as Peter had already recovered from his wounds with a robotic arm created in Wakanda, he saw the news of another web slinger in town. An amateur hero with the identity of Spider-Man, Peter thought to himself that this could be an excellent chance to pass the mantle of Spider-Man at last. Peter approached the amateur hero, who turned out to be none other than Miles Morales. Peter said that he is the Amazing Spider-Man and that he will train him to be a much better Spider-Man than he ever was. And that is going to be it for the finale of What If Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man had been in the MCU in Avengers Endgame. If you guys did enjoy this Marvel's What If and would like to see more, do make sure to subscribe, like, like, share, and turn your notifications on so you and your friends are all up to date with latest content. I hope you guys did enjoy this series. It did take me a very long time to put out. I did end up getting this out very late in the game, but I do hope that you guys enjoyed it, and I can't thank you enough for waiting patiently for it. But anyways, I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you so much. Have a fantastic day.